It's a new day and a new episode coming at you. This one I think you all will enjoy. Today, my guest is the incredible, talented, and kindest person ever, Liz Byrne. Liz started out in the performing world at a young age and made her Broadway debut at just 19 years old in the Broadway show Baby It's You, co-starring alongside two past guests of My World with Stories, Pearl and Beth Leavel. She is also a nanny and a businesswoman in her own children's music entertainment company. She has a lot to unfold and so many wonderful stories to share, so let's bring her on right now. Please welcome Liz Byrne.
Thank you so much for your patience. I so appreciate it. It's so nice to finally meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear what we're going to chat about.
Yeah. All right. So should we just get started?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So how did you first get into performing? What was your start to theater and just performing in general?
So fun. I feel like this is such a typical story where I can't remember a time where I wasn't performing in some capacity. My grandpa, my parents were young when they had me, and then my grandparents were then young. So my grandpa would watch me every day when my parents were working, and he was a performer back in the 60s. So he was very musical and loved movie musicals, and would show me the Carol Burnett show when I was really little. And then I was obsessed with the Wizard of Oz and Judy Garland. And anyway, he really encouraged me to always sing. So it seems like it was something that was just always a part of my identity in some aspect. And then when I was in third grade, there was an audition for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolored Dreamcoat at a local high school. And I did that. And that was my first show. And that was it. That was it. It was just a knowing, I knew that everything else didn't work. I knew that soccer wasn't going to happen. I knew that all of these other things, I was just nope, don't want to do that. So anyway, that's where I got the bug.
No, that was me too. I tried everything and nothing worked.
It's amazing though to have parents, and I, sometimes I nanny now and I see how much effort parents put into being okay, we know our kid is going to like something, we have to have the patience to, trial and error. And so thank God we had parents that pushed us because what would have happened if we didn't?
I know that was me, because when I went to college, I kind of was thinking maybe I shouldn't do the podcast anymore, because it was oh, I'm not going to have time. And then if it wasn't for my parents pushing me, being oh, you should keep doing this, yes, I would have, continued.
That's amazing. Thank God for good, supportive parents. We need them.
Yes. So one thing that I thought was so interesting about you is that when you were around 18, 19 years old, you went to the city and you moved there and you were on Broadway. So how did that whole process go? Because you didn't just go straight into college like a lot of other people did.
Yeah, it was. So I grew up on Long Island. I always like to tell people that. So it wasn't as if I would love to be able to say I moved from the other side of the country and had never been in New York before. I grew up on Long Island. So I did have accessibility to the city. So every weekend, luckily, again, thanking my parents, they let me be really independent. And I would go into the city every weekend, a lot of the time by myself as a freshman in high school. And I learned how to navigate the city. I knew that's where I wanted to be. I knew I loved that energy. So I had that alongside. I also did Broadway Artists Alliance throughout high school. So I was taking classes with casting directors. And so I was dipping my toes in training in that sense. So I felt you're never fully ready, but I felt a little bit ready. And then I also was freelancing with an agent my senior year of high school. So I had that behind me. That was also met with, I had a really hard time academically in school. So I didn't see myself thriving in college in any sense of the word. So that really just did not feel like the right fit for me. So my voice teacher at the time, Celeste Simone, suggested, she said, well, what if you move to New York City? What if you go to community college in the city, and why don't you take classes and then you can still audition? A light bulb went off of like, well, that sounds like the best thing ever. um, and so I spoke to my parents, and that took a little bit of convincing, but they supported me. And I got this dorm on 34th Street and 8th Avenue, and it was in the New Yorker Hotel. So I lived there for a semester, and thank God I started booking work. So I stopped going to college, which I wouldn't advise for everybody. I had such a hard time focusing in school, and it was much easier for me to focus in a 29-hour reading than it was in school. And then I got, during winter break, where I was intending on going back my second semester, I booked a show. It was a workshop called Me and Miss Monroe, and it was kind of like Smash. And it had a great cast, and they offered me my equity card. So I was like, see you, college. I don't want to go back. So, but anyway, I can keep talking about it if you want, because I feel like I would love to go to high schools and be like, everybody has their own path. I did this path, and I think everybody dreams of like leaving high school and landing on Broadway. And while it was amazing, it was extraordinarily challenging. I didn't have a community really of friends here. Thank God my boyfriend at the time lived in New Jersey, so his mom would drive me. She's an actor. She would drive me after her shows, and I'd cry going to New Jersey, be like, I don't have anybody. So while it was great and it was so amazing to start working professionally, it was definitely challenging to navigate not having a community of people and figuring out my way. But it was definitely unique.
Mm-hmm.
I will say.
So, what was your Broadway debut like? You were in Baby It's You. So,
Yes.
how did that come? Was that like right after your equity card?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it is wild. Like when I think of how quickly things happened then, how flippin' young I was. I didn't feel like it then, though. I will say I felt much older at that age than I do now, and I'm in my very early new 30s. But anyway, how did that happen? It is so wild how, like, it seems like Broadway is the hardest to get to when you just get that audition in your inbox and you work on the packet and you show up in the same rooms that you auditioned for, regional theaters. Like the process in that way is, for me, it was just so similar that I was like, I can't believe I'm auditioning for Broadway. So I went in and I did my packet. The material did feel like a good match for me. It was very like old school 1960s. And that's something that I had always gravitated towards. So I was really excited, which is, I'm learning what I've learned to be very important. I was very excited about the material and the style and the tone. And so anyway, so I went in and I did it, and I lived on 46th Street at the time, and I walked home, and then they said, we want you to come back to dance, literally like in an hour. So I came back, and it was three of us, myself and two other gals. The three of us learned a combination and this is in front of the whole team. I should say that. So this was, there are at least 10 people behind the table watching me, and I am not a dancer. I love to move, and I really like to move. I really love to do it once I know the steps. It's learning the steps that'll sometimes, like my brain sometimes when choreographers are talking, it's just, and this is not to be disrespectful, it's just my brain on overload. It's just like wah, wah, wah. I was like, right foot step on the turn, but But anyway, yeah. So then I went home. Oh, they asked me to dance. They asked me to sing again. I went home and I got the call from Rachel Hoffman and my agent at the time. They both were on the line and they were like, "You're making your Broadway debut." I was like, "What?" And what was so cool, they told me I was making my Broadway debut on July 19th, which was my 19th birthday. So it was like the best. It was just the best. And I just was endlessly grateful. And so many people came, and I just was very, very lucky. I feel like I'm giving you the longest winded answers to all of these questions.
I talked to Barry Pearl, and we were talking about you for a little bit.
No! Oh my God.
We were supposed to do it a long time ago too.
Oh my gosh.
I was actually just texting today Liz Byrne, and I know that she did Baby It's You with you.
Yeah,
Because
she was one of our understudies, I believe. She understudied my daughter, the character that was and others. Yeah, talented lady. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was talking to her because we're trying to arrange a podcast as well.
I have not. That is so. He was obviously in Greece.
Yes.
And so Barry Pearl was in Baby It's You, and he played my dad, and Beth Leavel played the mom. I know her a little bit, and he was so great and so sweet. And I was so excited to be in a show with somebody who was in Greece.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh God. And he was so, Mr. Lattieri, whatever he says in that movie. But anyway, hi, Barry Pearl. Oh, that's awesome. I hope he's doing well.
So unfortunately, Baby It's You only ran for a short amount of time.
Hot second.
Yeah. Wow. That was in 2011.
Yeah. So what was interesting about my contract was that it was wild. And I have to go back to equity and be like, how is this allowed? So I signed on as a standby, like my audition notice or, breakdown said Liz is coming in to stand by. What was interesting was that the girl who played the part, Kelly Barrett, was leaving to do, I think she was filming a series. She was leaving the same week as the standby, who was Chelsea Morgenstock. So there was literally nobody and they did, I don't think they had a vacation swing. So I went in and I was the one playing the role because I didn't have a standby. It was wild. So I don't know. The second week, I think I had a standby. But anyway, at the end of the second week, when I'd been performing for 2 weeks, and then I was going to assume the standby role because Kelly was coming back, we got the notice that the show was closing. And that was so sad. I mean, you kind of know because you see, it's as obvious as you see fewer people in the seats, and you perform, you go out on a Wednesday matinee, and it's oh God, nobody's in the second part of the mezz or the balcony, and you're and then you look at the numbers, and then you hear things through word of mouth. But anyway, so that was interesting. That was a lot of professional experiences in a short period of time, having that. Within weeks, making the Broadway debut and also experiencing the meeting, with the producer coming out being we're closing, and it's hard. Yeah. It's a part of the gig. It's wild. So that's that.
Was there anything that you took away from that experience?
Oh my gosh. Performing wise or life wise or
just anything.
So much. So much. What did I take away from that experience? I learned that a big thing that I learned was that even though I wasn't, I was only on for the first 2 weeks, and then I went on a lot after that. But in the few months that I was there, it was interesting to see how consumed I was by the show, how it felt challenging. And maybe it's just because I was at the beginning of it, but I know this can be like this for other performers, is that, it's very exciting being in a show, and it's a lot of energy. It's just so much energy. And you find yourself, waking up so late in the morning and then being all right, like I'm gonna, depending on what your track is, I mean, if it's a demanding track, I would be in bed all day. But I just remember being like wanting to mentally conserve my energy because I knew I'd be very stimulated at night. So that surprised me, that like trying to balance my life as Liz Byrne with being an actor, I found that was definitely challenging and just something that, needs to be worked through. And you're mindful of, because you're not going to be in a show forever. Like, okay, I'll eventually come back to myself. Oh, nobody told me, and people need, I didn't know. And I still feel guilty about this. So this is a decade later, but nobody told me you had to tip your dressers and your wig people. And I felt terrible. Somebody had mentioned it like a week after I went on or something. And I was like, what? And I felt so bad. And of course I did. But it was just one of the things that nobody told me about. It was just like this thing that people knew to do. Oh, and at your put-in, you bring like donuts, which I did not know. Beth Leavel, we were on our way walking to my put-in, and she was like, you have to go get donuts. And she literally handed me $20 and she was like, go get donuts. She's just the best that way. And I was like, okay. Like I was so nervous and it's like, here, everybody eat donuts. Please forgive me if I mess up. So anyway, those, I mean, I don't, I'm sure there were more things, but the donuts and the tipping is what came to the top of my mind.
Yeah. Everybody likes donuts.
Who doesn't like? Well, now I have celiac, so I can't eat donuts, but then I could.
Yeah.
They're delish.
So now I was watching one of your TikToks, and you were saying that after Broadway, you kind of like, you didn't leave the business, but you kind of like put it as like a side thing, because now you're like a nanny and you actually have your own business of doing kids parties. So like, how did that like come about?
What a question. So it definitely was never intentional. After Baby It's You, I was given these incredible opportunities for, Broadway shows and like being called in like close to the end, like just these, now looking back, like being like, oh my gosh. And, while I would show up and I would learn everything and I would be as prepared as I knew how to be, it's hard to maintain that. It's hard to go in. It was harder or challenging for me, I should say, when casting or even people behind the table already had an expectation of what they thought that I was. Instead of, it was exciting to walk into rooms where people didn't know me and it was like, get to know me. So I was starting to have to live up to a certain expectation, which really intimidated me at that age because I had no idea why I booked jobs. I was like, is it because I made a silly face when I did my 16 bar cut? Like everything was on instinct and no confidence. I didn't know who I was because I was so young. And so anyway, I would show up to these auditions and I would do them. But I think everything that I just said prevented me from being able to be free and really show who I was and not try to copy other performers that I saw. And I think things just kind of slowly stopped out of intimidation. And, I wasn't immature, but I just wasn't ready yet. I was 19, 20, 21. And again, like my friends and people my age were still in college. So really nobody was in the city. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in New Jersey, but I still did some readings. I did some workshops. Like I dabbled my toe and I did a solo show, but it wasn't like I had continued with that momentum, which was hard. That was challenging because it was like, oh, we're never going to make it. But now I look back and I'm like, oh, girl, you were so little. And it's fine. But so how did I get into nannying? I needed to pay the bills and I knew that I was terrible at waiting tables and serving. So I started to do that. Yeah, I started the children's music entertainment company really through family that I worked with. They were like, would you want to sing at a party? And I think it was a while ago. And I said, sure. And then I thought, well, wait, I could do this, and wait, I could do that. And if I tell the different families that I nanny for that I do this, it could be successful. And thank God I did. So I've been doing that for a while. And, it's interesting to see, and I see this with a lot of my actor friends, like regardless of what, how many shows they've been in or whatever, eventually everybody's show closes and you have to audition for the next one. So in those times we have to work. It's interesting to see how people, and I always am interested to hear how people balance surviving and paying the bills with auditioning and having the time and having the mental capacity. It's really, that I think is what the hard thing is about being an actor in New York City. I don't think that it's the hustle of auditioning. That's challenging, but when you finally get to, do the audition, you're like, oh, I'm surrounded by people, like-minded people, and we're all here to do something that we love. That's, better than sometimes the survival jobs where either they could be fulfilling and joyous or not.
Yeah, it's always good, I think, to have a second plan, like something else that you're interested in.
Totally. And it's, people, I think specifically after the pandemic, because when I started Rockin' Rascalz, people would say, oh, are you giving up? People thought that because I was doing like a side business that I was giving up in some way. And now, like, especially after the pandemic, it's the cool thing to do, to have a side hustle or a podcast or like all of these different things. So it's okay for us to be good at a bunch of different things, and we get more experience being a human and can bring it to our work.
Yeah. No, I could totally relate because in high school I did all the shows, I sang at everything, and then I got to college and I majored in communications, and people were like, "What, are you gonna stop doing what you used to do?" And I was like, "No, this is another thing that I need to do." Just
Yes. And also when you're young, that's when you should be trying different things, and you get to see what sticks and what, it's a little woo woo, but what the universe wants for you. Like it's things will fall into alignment if you're making yourself available.
yeah.
So, yeah.
What is it like working with young kids? Because you have the business, Rockin' Rascal.
Yes.
Like, what is it like working with kids? Like, you have to have a lot of patience and you have to be creative and fun.
Yes. Patience being the number one. No, I really do enjoy working with kids, especially like little kids. I think that they're so funny. Like the things that these kids have. I mean, they are. Oh my gosh, the comedy. But I grew up with a really, really big family. So I was always used to being around little kids. So it just felt like the natural transition for me to work with kids if I was going to make money, not doing theater. What is it like working with kids? You have to have a lot of patience. To be a nanny is interesting because you have to see how the parents parent. You have to see what their discipline style is or their parenting style is. Some parents are really adamant on something that's called gentle parenting. So you really have to learn that style because you don't, how I would handle a situation with my own kids. I do not have children yet. Could be different from how they want their household to go. So, but it's fun and it's silly. And I love one thing that's really funny that I get a kick out of, but the kids don't, is that they can't stand when I sing. And I have nannied, on and off for a long time, and kids, and I'll sing lightly and I'll sing a song that they know, and they'll just look at me and be like, please stop. And I said to one little girl, she was 4, I said, because we had a little like fun back and forth, I said, do you know that some people pay me to sing? And she said, well, I don't. I thought it was so funny. But anyway, or like when I'll do voices, when I read books, I'm like, oh, I could use this as a creative outlet. And they can't stand that either. They're like, no, please, regular voice. I'm like, fine. So kids are fun.
Yep. My little cousins, when they were like really little, they would always have like an entertainer at the birthday parties. And like that was the person that would like entertain them for like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
lot.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a whole other ball game, the birthday parties. I really like that too because it's a shorter period of time and I'm not in charge of, I'm in charge of making sure that the kids have fun, but I'm not in charge of chasing them, making sure that they eat, bringing them, potty training them and bringing them to the bathroom. I mean, that's the more tiring part. But it's fun to be able to sing and to be silly and to see them respond to that most of the time. So
And it's good though, because at the end of the day, you could just hand them off.
exactly. That's why people ask me now, but I mean, I'm not going to be a parent anytime soon, but people are like, it's going to be so easy for you when you have kids and, you've nannied and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but I get compensated. I get compensation, when I give the kids back. I don't, I get to go home and be in my own space, but yes, giving the kids back is a nice perk.
You recently in January did a cabaret, which I live streamed and I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
So can you explain how you started making, like, how do you make a show like that? Like, how do you
Cabaret show?
How do you do that?
So I did one when I was 20 and then 3 in my 20s and then one. So I've done 4 and they've all been so different and such a different experience. Number one, you really need an amazing music director. Like for me, it's like I could have all of these ideas, but and all of my music directors have been great, but I've just learned the more that I do this, the more I appreciate. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God for these people because I would have fallen on my face if it wasn't for them. So that's number one, is really have a music director that you're connected with, that you vibe with, and that you have similar tastes to, so that you can, shoot ideas off of one another. But anyway, I reached out to 54 Below. I started doing a few shows at 54 Below. And those were the 3 that I did in my 20s. And I just said I want to do a show. And I said, I've been on Broadway. I had an idea, like postmodern jukebox was really popular at the time. And I was a millennial. So I was like, oh, what if, because I love all things vintage and old fashioned. And I was like, oh, I'll do Liz Byrne, the original vintage millennial or something. It was a long title. And that's what I did. And I loved it. So I would rehearse with my music director and come up with a set list. And you sometimes you have a director. I've had a director. Chris Rice Thompson was my first director of my first show. And, they help give you kind of an arc of, because my tendency and still is to be like, I want to do 11 o'clock numbers. That's what I'm like, I want to just do big. And then you get to the week of the show and you're like, oh my gosh, vocally, you really have to treat your voice, especially in that sense, like a bank account. Like you can't be taking out, most of your money in every song. You're like, okay, and people don't want to hear that anyway, or people, it's nicer to have contrast. I don't know if I've answered your question at all. How do you, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no one way to do it.
Yeah.
You have a music director, you have your date, you have a sing through, you have ideas of how you want the transitions between each song to go. I am not one to really write a script, where I have learned in the last show that maybe I should lean towards. But I like to, as I get older, I'm like, maybe we should write a script. But anyway, I like to make jokes and I like to just see how the audience is. And I like to see what the energy is and go off of that, which is, when you think about it outside of that space, you're like, oh my gosh, it'll take 20 years off of your life, because in the moment you're like, your brain goes so quick, but so slow. It's like, do I move the microphone here? Like, that's how my brain feels in the middle of doing a show. So anyway, you can edit that part out. Feel free.
When I sing, I I always think of what I'm going to do next in the moment. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, that's just.
I know. Well, I think it takes time, it takes doing it, and it takes just seeing what style works for you. I think because I spent so much time listening. I would listen to podcasts and I would listen to how other performers, what their process was. And I would think, because I was not secure on how I worked, I would think, oh God, okay, that's the right way to do it. I'm going to try to do it their way, instead of seeing like, okay, well, I respond better to doing it like this. So this is my creative process. So, it depends, because there's some performers who never have a script, and they thrive off of that. And that's what makes them special. And then the same vice versa, some people have to. I'm figuring it out still.
You learn every day.
You do. And that's the point of, this whole thing.
So I also like that you've had some people come up on stage with you. I know that you mentioned her name before.
Yeah.
But and I know the story is true. You met Beth from watching her in Drowsy and then sending her a video.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yes, I can. It's so funny because I'm not old now, but I'm much older than I was when it happened, and I still get mortified telling the story because I lied about it for so long because I was mortified. So yes. So when I was 14 years old, I saw The Drowsy Chaperone, and it was at the time where I was in my freshman high school musical. It was Crazy for You. And I understudied Polly, which I was very excited about as a freshman. But anyway, during that time, it was just like, I just wanted to hear musicals. And that's like where it was just nonstop, where I was playing cast albums at home. And so like in that time, I saw The Drowsy Chaperone, and it was like the most perfect thing I could ever see on stage. Like, I just love old school vaudeville, broad comedy. I loved the music. I loved the costumes. It was overwhelming, to say the least. But anyway, at the time that I saw Drowsy, I was very into discovering Judy Garland and Liza Minnelli, and YouTube had just come out. I'll age myself. So I'd been watching a lot of YouTube videos on them. So when I saw Beth, I was like, oh my God, she's so cool. And she, I feel like that's such a cheap way of explaining how I really feel. But I would be lying if I, said that she didn't heavily influence me at that time. She just watching her strength and her, trying to think of because watching her now, I can break down. I'm like, oh, that's why, she's so fabulous. But then I think I was just drawn to her strength on stage, her groundedness, and her way of being so truthful and big at the same time, where I feel like that is not easy to do at all, and she has mastered it. And it was, it was just, she's great. So anyway, yes, I did. I recorded myself singing her song, and I sent it in a fan letter, and I wrote, please let me know if you think I'll make it in the business, basically. And she was kind, and she responded, and the rest is history. She's the best. We're very close.
I always ask people that come on that have worked with her, I'm like, what's your Beth Leavel story? And I feel like if one day I have her back on here, she's going to be like, why do you do that?
You know what? It's so funny. So many people have so many Beth Leavel stories, and I feel like she's like, I don't even remember, her light, not that it's not important, but there's so much that she's in so many shows with so many people. I do have a Beth Leavel story from when we were on stage in Baby It's You, which was fun. She, I have a few, but there was a moment, so she played my mom. And there was a moment where my character would run and embrace her, and it was the end of this emotional moment, and I had just gotten to sing. And so we were embraced, and so I'm 5'4" and she's 5'8", and she was wearing heels and I think I was wearing flats. So even, there was even more of a difference. So when I would hug her, I think she would, like bend to meet me and I would reach. So like her necklace got stuck on my costume and we were supposed to, and like I think her mic must have been off, hopefully. And she's like, how the bleep are we gonna get this? Like yeah. So we finally detached, and yeah, she's great.
Yeah, he was one of the first people that came on my podcast.
She did?
Yeah.
She's the best. Love that. I'm in good company.
And then I got to see her actually, which kind of leads to my next question, at FPAC, because I go to school around that area.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love FPAC.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. So how did you actually get involved with FPAC?
So how did I get involved in FPAC? I met Raylan, who runs it, through Clay and Chris Rice Thompson, who are my peeps. Love them. Chris was the one that I mentioned that directed my first cabaret. And I think we were at Blockheads, which was like the place to go, on 50th forever. And they closed. But anyway, we were at Blockheads and we had a dinner, and that's where I met Raylan. And I don't know how long it was in between. Oh, Chris was doing Happy Christmas and had said, I want you to be in the show. And I'll put he was so generous and was like, what songs do you want to sing? He's like, we need a funny song and we needed this, a ballad. And I was like, okay. So I went to FPAC and they were just so welcoming and the community was so warm. And I think I was there for 3 days. And I say this in a positive way. It felt like I had been there for a month and that I'd known everybody forever. So I just love them so much.
It's like literally, because Dean, that's where I go to school. Dean's like right there.
We would, a lot of the actors for when I did Mermaid, the housing was at Dean, I think.
Oh, wow.
Or like they had apartments or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, it was, right. Because I would drive and I think I would pass Dean to go back to where I was staying.
Yeah, a lot of, actually, I think now FPAC is collaborating with Dean.
Oh, that's so smart.
And now they're like giving like internships, or like if you want to like audition and like do a show, and like they'll like work around your schedule with your classes and stuff.
That's amazing. Do you guys go to the Black Box often? I love the Black Box cafe.
I haven't.
Oh, you should. It's the best. But I love that they have that at your school. That's great.
So do you have any advice for people that just, it doesn't even have to be theater related, like any advice for someone that has a passion to do something?
I would say, because I think passions can also come up at different parts of people's lives. So I think that, when you're little and you're passionate about, I'll just use doing theater because that's the easiest, most accessible. I think pursuing every aspect of that passion, pursuing maybe working backstage, when you're a little bit older, and just pursuing every aspect to see what you really respond to. And then as you get older, just being open to being like, oh, maybe I like this too. Like I obviously love theater, but maybe I also love figuring out Rock and Rascalz and marketing with that. Like, it doesn't mean that I love my main passion that I, want to pursue any less, but it's okay to like different things and meet different kinds of people and to expand in that way. So that's what I would say.
So what's next for you? Like, you have your business and nannying and stuff, but
I am. What is next? So I am at the point where luckily Rock and Rascalz is moving and it's where I want it to be. And, I have a great family that I nanny for, and I just did this show. Right now, I'm very excited to fully get back into working in theater. So I feel as though I'm at the very beginning of that for the second time, but I'm much more excited, and I have a lot more life experience, and, I'm just happier to know who I am more and to do it again. I can't wait to see how it turns out.
So where could people follow you if they want to stay up to date on?
Sure. For sure. So I'm in the middle of rebuilding my website. So that will eventually be accessible and will be lizbyrne.com. But they can follow me on social at it's Liz Byrne. That's Instagram. And the same thing on TikTok. I'm on the TikTok, which I love. And yeah, they could follow me there. And I think I'm on Facebook too. I don't do Facebook that much. It's mostly for the fam bam. But yeah, mostly Instagram and TikTok.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to finally connect. Go you for how old were you when you started doing the podcast? Were you freshman?
Yeah, I was 15.
Girl, that's amazing. It's so. You must. I don't know if you have the hindsight, but like, do you look back and think like, oh my gosh, like when you see other 14-year-olds, you're like, go me a little bit, because I was brave and pursued something new, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely look back at it. I posted a video yesterday on my podcast page, and it had like some throwbacks to like when I started it, and I was like, oh my God. And then it was actually when Beth was on, she said something to me at the end, and I don't think like myself then kind of like took it like in, and I looked back at it now and I'm like, I think I know what she meant, because it was like she showed me a picture when she won her Tony Award, and she was like, I just want to show you this. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever at that time.
I just want to show you this other prop I had out, another picture.
Yeah.
We were talking about Tony and I. This was the day after the Tony Awards. This was on the front page of the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Is that cool or what?
Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Again, my junior high school Beth Leavel's going, are you kidding me? Wow, I'm lucky.
And now I look back at it and I think she was just showing it to me to show that success can happen. You just have to work for it.
Oh, what a moment. She really is the best. She's so generous and available and wants everybody to succeed. And she has been one of the biggest cheerleaders in my life. So anybody who is blessed to have her support is very, very lucky.
Yeah.
You should remind her of that moment when she comes back, of you when she showed you the Tony Award picture. It's so funny. When I see Beth, I'll be sure to mention your name, and I'm sure your ears will be ringing. And yes, I'm sure she'll be back. She's great at doing, she gets right to the point. Sometimes she'll be like, Lizzie, tell the story about how we met, and I'll start, and she'll be like, I don't edit well. And she's like, bring it home. Come on. Get to the point. Get to the punchline. So
yeah,
I'll plug her show, Old Friends, with Bernadette Peters. I saw it in LA. I visited her. Oh my gosh, it's so good. You should definitely go to see it.
Oh, I am.
Are you?
I'm going.
You have your ticket?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have to tell me what you think. Yeah, I'm definitely going to see it in New York. But I just was, it's at the Amundsen Theater in LA. And I'd never been there before. And it is magical. It is gigantic. And just the energy was palpable. And it's Sondheim. So it's just, and it's Bernadette Peters. And I mean, obviously I was there for Beth, but to see Bernadette on, to watch that curly red hair and that little body, I'm like, oh my God. I love her so much. But yes, it was great. It was so good.
I'm excited.
I'm so glad that we did this. And keep in touch. Like, let me know if you ever need anything, anything. It's just always keep in touch.
Thank you.
All right, girl. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening and watching to My World with Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date, you can follow My World with Stories podcast on both Facebook and Instagram at My World with Stories podcast. Make sure to give this podcast a like for future episodes coming your way. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will see you guys next time.